Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. So in this first video dedicated to Black History Month, I will be talking about a very special neighborhood in Montreal, where I live, Montreal, called La Petite Bourgogne. Did you know that this little borough was one of many Canadian destinations during the Underground Railroad and contributed to the growth and expansion of jazz music in the 19th century? Let's take a deeper look. The Underground Railroad was a secret network formed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the early 19th century by American abolitionists. The network helped many African Americans escape slavery by arranging escape routes from the south of the United States to the north, free states, and even Canada. The Underground Railroad brought between 30,000 to 40,000 African Americans to the British North America, which is now Canada. The Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad that ran on railroad tracks. It was an intricate clandestine network of people and refugees that helped those enslaved on the southern plantations achieve freedom in the north. The network was maintained by abolitionists committed to human rights and equality. Their ranks included free blacks, other slaves, white and native sympathizers, Quakers, Methodists, Baptists, urban dwellers, farmers, men and women, American and Canadian. But why Canada? On June 19, 1793, Attorney General John White introduced a bill to abolish slavery in Upper Canada, which encouraged American slaves that were seeking freedom to enter the land known to the British. A small percentage of fugitives were already moving from the United States to Canada in the early 1800s, but after 1850, the arrivals of people seeking freedom in Upper Canada increased dramatically due to the adoption of the American Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed slave hunters to pursue fugitives in the northern states. The arrival to Montreal. Many fugitives arrive in Quebec in the hope of a better future. Black people, a part of the Montreal community, still had to occupy low-income and status positions such as cleaners, shoe shiners, domestic workers, table cleaners, and water carriers. Some, however, will become prosperous by forming their own business or by specializing in trades in demand. Others find work in steamboats or in the constructions of canals. Despite everything, the majority of Black Americans and West Indians arriving at the destination prefer to move to English Canada, Ontario, thus wishing to live in a so-called more welcoming environment. Montreal's first Black community was mainly made up of African Americans living in Faubourg Saint-Antoine, a neighborhood now known as La Petite Bourgogne. This is how the municipality of Little Burgundy was founded. This one being known at the beginning of the 19th century as being one of the most electrifying and innovative neighborhood in Montreal, not only for its nightclubs and jazz venues, but also for its important mark left when it comes to Canadian railway in particular. The Montreal and Lachine Railroad, later renamed Grand Trunk Railway, then finally Canadian National Railways. Black men found a relatively stable and consistent income working as railroad porters, one of the few opportunities available to them. Many Black men who found work as porters were highly educated, but due to racism and discriminatory hiring policies, they were unable to obtain employment in their respective fields. Instead, they had to work as railroad porters just to receive a steady, albeit low income. Black porters were paid less than their white colleagues, received no promotions, and could not apply for higher positions, such as engineer or conductor. Following their men's footsteps, spouses, families, and girlfriends settled in Saint-Antoine. It will take decades to break down the unwritten barriers of segregation weighing on the housing market in Saint-Antoine. In 1907, many Blacks were then victims of racism within the dominant churches of all denominations, whose congregations were predominantly white. The Union Congregational Church, founded by the community of Saint-Antoine, is dedicated to meet the needs of its community. The Union Congregational Church emphasizes unity, community, and acceptance of Black people. Jazz. Black culture defined the neighborhood in the 1920s, which generated millions of dollars in revenue for the city of Montreal.
Électrique, sensationnelle, la ville de Montréal.
It was known as a wide open city.
It was alive. It was the city to be in if you like nightlife.
C'était le golden age de Montréal.
Black Canadians opened and operated famous nightclubs while controlling gambling businesses along Saint-Antoine Street, thirsty for alcohol, gambling, and the nightlife. Saint-Antoine was then a mecca of nightlife and jazz. Just like Chicago and New Orleans, Montreal became one of the 3 jazz hubs in Northern America.
Montreal had so many clubs and dance halls.
On St. Catherine Street, there was 980 clubs.
Au point de vue cabaret, tu en avais partout.
Of course, we had about 600 clubs in Montreal.
Las Vegas n'existait pas vraiment encore.
C'est Montréal qui était l'endroit où tu allais pour faire tout ce que tu fais maintenant, par exemple, à Vegas.
Las Vegas is one thing, but Montreal was big. Montreal was happening. Packed 7 nights a week. All the big acts came here. Singers, dancers, comedians, you name it, they were here.
It's a huge, huge jazz influence in Montreal.
Les grands artistes comme Louis Armstrong, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Sammy Davis, they all loved Montreal. They all thought Montreal was the place to be.
Famous jazz artists such as Oscar Peterson, Oliver Jones, Charles Biddle, and Daisy Sweeney are discovered playing in famous clubs. Rockhead Paradise is a former jazz club founded in 1928 by entrepreneur Rufus Rockhead. It is the best-known nightclub devoted to Black customers in Montreal. Rockhead's Paradise has been home to American jazz legends like Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Lead Belly, Nina Simone, Fats Waller, Dizzy Gillespie, and Sammy Davis Jr. It also helped launch the talented career of many Montreal musicians.
Clubs used to be open 24 hours, so you used to play to 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then as a jazz musician, there was 3 or 4 after-hour places where the musicians themselves, we would go just to play music, play jazz music.
The Rockhead Paradise was founded during a time when authorities disapproved of Black entrepreneurship. Not only did Rufus Rockhead create a thriving business, but he also supported the career of many young Black musicians who did not have the opportunity to showcase their talents elsewhere. After the 1960s, La Petite Bourgogne suffered a severe blow with the closing of the Lachine Canal in 1970. 20,000 jobs were thus lost. Unfortunately, after the 1960s, times changed in the Montreal music scene and jazz clubs struggled to stay open. The district suffers from urban degradation and loses its nightlife culture. Nowadays, jazz has become a less and less popular genre of music in Montreal, and the English-speaking Black residents of La Petite Bourgogne are part of a community constantly confronted with the gentrification of their neighborhood, as well as the impact of 3 generations of compulsory schooling in French in Quebec. Many Montrealers and Quebecois residents are unaware of the history and heritage of this community. An estimated of 30,000 to 4,000 people seeking freedom entered Canada during the last decade of slavery in the United States. The newcomers migrated to various parts of what is now Ontario. They also fled to other parts of the British North America, such as New Brunswick, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. After this mass migration, Black Canadians helped build strong communities and contributed to the development of the provinces in which they lived and worked.